was.
All right, recorder's on, guys. Recorder's on.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to the Union County Planning Board meeting of January the 9th, 2018. We call this meeting to order. The first point of business is to appoint Charles as a voting member tonight. We need his vote. Charles, is that okay with you? Thank you very much. Do we have a motion for that?
Make a motion.
Everett, second. Okay, excuse me, Robert?
Sure.
And then Everett.
Everett, second.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Okay, first item is to take a look at the agenda. There is a deletion that needs to be announced, and that is item number 7, the conditional rezoning petition number 17-10. That has been withdrawn, and there'll be a new date and a new hearing set on that. Has everybody got that? Okay, thank you very much. So with that deletion, I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Do we have a second? Second, thank you, Robert. Okay, passes. All right. I'd like to go ahead.
You gotta vote.
Pardon?
Gotta vote.
Oh, we got to vote on that, excuse me. All right, you're absolutely right, thank you. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's good. Appreciate that, Counselor. Thanks for keeping me in the straight and narrow. Ask you to take a look, or note that also on number 4, that those minutes will move to the next meeting. The meeting is December 5th. So those will move to our next February meeting. At the request of planning office. We don't need a vote on that, do we? Right, okay, thank you. Next item up for business is item number 5. It is the conditional rezoning petition number 17-07, requesting rezoning classification from R40 to Office CZ containing 1.544 acres, being tax map number 06156-003, located at 1425 Providence Road South, and being within the Sandy Ridge Township. I'd like to also make a comment about this. This has been referred back to us by the Board of Commissioners for further discussion. So with that, Lee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I will recuse myself from this one conditional rezoning because I have some conflict of interest.
That is very admirable of you, Russell. We appreciate that honesty coming forth like that. So that,
In that situation, the board actually has to vote.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
So Mr. Wing is asking for it to be recused. The board actually needs to take action.
I'll
Okay.
make a motion to recuse Mr. Wing.
okay,
And
we get-
I'll second.
all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, Lee, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This rezoning petition came to you back in November. And you guys heard from the applicant and some of the adjacent property owners. I think your vote in November was 3-1 to make a favorable recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. County Commissioners in December, I believe Brian, correct me on my times, but in December conducted a public hearing, heard input from adjacent property owners and the applicant, and then at their second reading on this, ended up referring this back to the planning board for some more discussion. So that's why it's back before you guys today. So it's really, in general, it's the same It's the same petition. There are a couple minor modifications that were made after your agenda packets went out, so they weren't included in those. And I'll kind of briefly go over those with you. But just to kind of recap where this is just north of the intersection. This is on Providence Road, just north of the intersection of Newtown. This neighborhood, this is the Chatsworth neighborhood, if you're familiar with that. This is Newtown Road, Providence. This is the Newtown Market shopping center. There's a coffee shop right there that a lot of people are familiar with. Across the street here is CVS, and there's an Auto Bell. And then this project is in the town of Marvin, but it was approved as a Publix grocery store. And I think there's some other retail that goes along with it, and even some age-restricted housing kind of behind that. So just kind of give you a general overview of that area. And this blue, again, that's Marvin, and the pink is the town of Weddington. So it is in close proximity to those municipalities. This is a site plan that was submitted. This is the same site plan that came back in November. And I say a site plan, it's not a detailed concept plan that shows building locations or anything like that. They have a building envelope that shows where development activity can take place on the site. Some of the conditions that they're putting on their project that are shown on this page, that they're going to provide stormwater detention. They're going to leave a 10-foot wide strip for S2, which is a high profile buffer. That's defined in our ordinance. And that existing vegetation will remain in that 10-foot strip. They've also limited the height of the building to 40 feet at 2 stories. This is kind of a general overview of the development status in the area, what's going on in the surrounding area. So you've got a good bit of undeveloped property across the street. You've got some developed properties in here where the subdivision is, and the commercial at the corner. So that's kind of what's going on in the area. This is the county's land use plan. So it's got a neighborhood center that's centered on the intersection of Newtown and Providence. Those are generally about a 1/4 mile out in radius. So this falls under that neighborhood center designation. The current zoning in the area, you've got it's not B4, but it's been normalized between all the municipalities. So you got a lot of commercial at the center, kind of around the intersection, and then a lot of low density residential out from that. No real environmental features on this property. There's a stream, it's a floodplain, some wetlands down here off of Newtown and kind of creeping up into the Chatsworth neighborhood. That's kind of behind this site, but on this property, there's no real identified environmental features based on our GIS. As far as transportation improvements, NC 16 is proposed to be widened to multi-lane, scheduled for 2023. And then there will be some turn lane improvements to Newtown Road as part of the Marvin Gardens development. And that was the Publix grocery store site that I was referring to. And these dots are just, these are traffic counts. So along Providence, just north of Newtown, you got about 20,000 vehicle trips a day. South of the intersection, you've got about 18,000. And then on Newtown, on the east side of the intersection, you have about 7,200 trips per day. Bjorn, is there anything you want to add to what I said? These are just some photographs of the site. This photograph, the first one at the top left, is looking south. That's looking from the property toward the intersection of Newtown. This next one on the top right, and I guess that's right, is looking north from the site, going up Providence Road. This is looking into the property, so currently there's a small house there. And this is looking across the street. there's a church kind of back in that grove of trees back there, but there's a big field kind of out in front. That's the PowerPoint. Let me, really quickly bring up, just as a reminder, the, so this is kind of what you saw previously on that slide. And, so all this is still the same that you saw at the last meeting, still a, two-story max, 40 feet maximum height. None of this stuff has changed here. The one thing that has changed, and so some of the other things that they included, let me briefly touch on that, as some of their conditions were, dedication of right-of-way for the future widening of 16. They have some design guidelines that were, that haven't changed from the previous submittal. And they have also agreed to do, our ordinance allows 2 types of lighting plans to be submitted with applications. One, we have a standard that says you have to be you can't exceed half a foot candle to the property line. And our ordinance allows 2 ways to meet that requirement. The first way is you can limit your fixture height and have full cutoff lights, which basically means you have I don't know off the top of my head what the height limit is. I think it's a 20-foot, 16-foot light, and full cutoff means that basically no light can project from the side. It's basically straight down. You can meet that standard that way, or you can provide a full photometric study, which actually that's where a lighting consultant plugs in the type of lights you're putting in, and it produces a photometric plan that shows the foot candles at different points along the property, and that way you can see what that is at the property line. And they've agreed to do that instead of limiting. I mean, they can still limit fixture heights, but if you actually do a photometric study, you know that it is half a foot candle or less at the property line. You're not guessing. So they've agreed to provide the photometric study. And then the one thing that has changed, they have updated their list of uses. And I think this is one of the things that came up. I wasn't at the public hearing, but Brian can correct me if I'm wrong. He was there. This is one of the things that came up during the public hearing, is my understanding that maybe the board wanted you guys to kind of look at was some of the uses. So this is a current list of uses the applicants provided. So the first use here is office. So you have 2 different, I think 2 different things that were talked about during the public hearing. Is you've got the office zoning category and you've got the office use category. So the office zoning category contains a laundry list of uses that could be anything from some offices, some light retail, a handful of other types of uses. Then you have the use category of office, which is an office and a medical office. And those are the 2 types of office uses. So that could be an attorney's office, it could be an accountant's office, general types of office uses. And then you have medical offices, which could be a doctor's office or dentist's office, or that kind of thing. So the first thing on here is the use category of office. The second thing is animal services. So they've limited that to grooming and training, supplies, and a veterinarian, including that you can't have overnight boarding unless it's accessory to that veterinary or hospital clinic. So basically, if the pet is there to have a procedure done, and that requires the pet to stay overnight, those kind of boarding facilities are allowed. But if you just want to board your pet for the weekend, that actually falls under a separate animal kennel category. So that's not allowed in office. So this is overnight boarding pertaining to veterinary services. Have to be entirely indoors, and they have to have an outside exercise area. You can see that they've, animal and outdoor runs, they have to have somebody has to be in attendance outside with those animals at all times. Commercial services, basically that's kind of a laundry list that's under the commercial services categories. They've got business support services, which is a good way to think about that's kind of like a Kinko's. So you gotta have copies made or something like that maybe an office use might not do in-house, or maybe they need a presentation made, they send it to Kinko's. Communication services, that could be like a call center, or it could be, I think that was the primary example given in the ordinance was a call center. Research services, those are, it's not LabCorp or anything like that. These are research services where people are actually doing research. They're researching a product or researching medicine to try to come up with a new type of use for that. Studios, instructional and services, and then personal improvement services. And personal improvement services is like a gym. So you go and work out. And the personal improvement service normally requires a special use permit. As part of the conditional rezoning process, they can go ahead and specify that is a use that they want to do in this category, and if it's approved by the commissioners, our ordinance actually says you can do it and not go through that special use process. So that's why they specified without the need for a special use permit. Again, a daycare center without the need of a special use permit, and then a self-storage, self-service storage facility type 1, which that is fully enclosed. If you imagine the storage facilities kind of like offices, that's what this is. So this is not like the metal building with the roll-up doors on the side. This has to be a fully enclosed building, and all the services, all the storage facilities have to be on the inside. There can't be any outside access. So those are the listed uses that they have come up with, an updated list to hopefully clarify what some of those uses are. So that's their application, and that's my staff presentation. I'll be more than happy to go into more depth if you would like. If not, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Anybody have any questions of Lee?
The applicant is here.
Pardon?
The applicant is here. I think everyone wants to be able to-
Lee, it looks like we don't have any questions for you at this time, but we may come back to you. So
Okay.
the applicant would like to come up and discuss anything, we would welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, James Allen Lee here on behalf of the applicant, Charlene Carter. And again, I've been here in front of you back in November. 4 of you anyway remember that hearing. And this has been sent down asking for your input based on the use classifications. And let me go through, I think Lee covered it very well, but go through and list or mention a couple of things. I think the confusion came in between the office zoning category, the office district, and the office use that is there within. And when we initially went to our pre-application meeting, what we discussed was we were kind of toying between going for an office classification and a B2 classification, and looking at what would be the best use for this property because of its proximity to residential uses. And our thought was, well, office is the only commercial that does not allow retail. And as I discussed, we didn't think that retail would be a good use there with the traffic in and out. We didn't think that would be there. We thought this was the least intrusive of them, and there were a couple of uses we thought we could use without a special use permit. So our thought was, let's ask for office and allow us to have that daycare center and the personal services studio without the special use permit. Well, there's a long list of uses allowed in O if you go through the table of uses. And when we sat down with planning after Mr. Simpson had asked for there to be some further input on these uses, I met with staff last week And we discussed some of those, because this happened pretty quickly, and there was a couple of holidays in between there. But we sat down and met last week, and we limited these down to, because there are a lot of uses that are in there that just quite honestly aren't feasible within, the acre that's left to be developed there. And any of these would be still subject to all the other conditions that are within the our conditional application and in the land use ordinance. So, for example, self-storage facility. I kind of struggled with this, and I was talking with my client about it. There has been a lot of interest in these. There's one going in around the corner from it. I personally don't think that's going to be a use that's going to be there, because who's going to want, you can't build a big enough building, 2 stories, 40 feet. But what would be the objection to having a building that's totally enclosed, all accesses from interior hallways? That would probably be one of the least obtrusive uses you could possibly put on there, other than an underground storage parking area, or underground storage, or underground parking deck, which is the only other use that I've been told in any of these things that some of the adjacent property owners would approve of. So we left it in there thinking, with the thought, hey, we're trying to sell this property. We want to leave as many uses as possible there. But if you read through the ordinance, each of those uses that we have listed are essentially an entirely indoor office building. If you read the research studio, under commercial services, it specifically says there can't be odors, dust, anything else emitted that leaves that property. So you're talking about a lab type setting that's completely indoors. So again, that is what we've done. Now, there've been a lot, this has gone back and forth, and it's been quite contentious. Honestly, it has. And I will say, there have been some legal arguments made, one way or the other. I'm not going to stand here and make a legal argument to y'all. I don't believe this is the proper forum for that. The county has legal staff. I've talked with them, and they are advising their clients, the commissioners, on what those things are. And I think that's best left there. I will say, I'm a lifelong resident of Union County. I've lived here a long time. This area has changed. I'm nostalgic. I remember riding around, seeing this, this area. It was the country. Go to Google Earth and go back into history and look back at, do the snapshot. And I was sitting there thinking, when I went back, the last good image I could get and look at was 1995, where you can kind of tell what it is, and zoom out and get where Waverly is, and you can reach over into Ballantyne. You can still see Arrow Plantation. It was there, but most of this was all farmland. And there still is a large tract of farmland across the street from this. And the old, I can't remember the LLC's name that owns it now, there's a little over 200 acres, and it's in Weddington. And eventually, that will probably be developed as well. I don't know if, but the area has changed. This is going to be a 4-lane major highway. Okay, 20,000 trips a day on that traffic count on there. The highest and best use of this property is not residential. You don't see people going up and putting nice houses that match the neighborhoods in these, with their driveway entering onto this highway. I've heard nobody wants to look out their back door and see an office building. But they're going to look out their back door and see a 4-lane highway if there's nothing there between it to block it. This area has changed. We're not going to stop that. We're not going to change that. And I sympathize and I empathize with the people, because change is hard. But this property is not residential property. It is in the comprehensive plan in that neighborhood center in an area that is changing. There are other applications along this area coming in to make changes. And we talked before about how zoning works. The county does not come in and say, when they do their comprehensive plan, they don't go out and say, here's your zoning. You're now this classification. No, they put a plan out there, and it's up to those individual property owners to go in and make application to change that zoning to meet the highest and best use for the property where they are, to meet what that property actually is. There was talk about the interconnectivity and all of that between these neighborhood centers to set up walking trails and sidewalks and those type of things. There is, if you read the comprehensive plan, when they widen Providence Road, there will be some type of a walking, biking path. I can't tell you which side of the road to be, because it's not to that design, not set yet. But again, our property goes from basically an acre and a half to an acre because of the dedication of right-of-way there for the widening of the road. So again, I would ask you to look at these uses, to take into account the fact that we have done everything within our power to be as accommodating to the adjacent property owners as we can be, and be able to preserve the value and enhance the value of my client's property. And every amendment we have made to this plan has been at the request of either planning staff, brought on our own account, or make, input from a county commissioner or from this board. Y'all mentioned light when you were here, when we were here last time, after the vote had already been taken. And that's when we went and said, hey, we are willing, that's the input we want. We're trying to be good neighbors and take that input and put it to use. And we went back and said, yes, we'll do a photometric study. That's what we want to be, good neighbors. But we also want to develop this property and make it useful to the county, to the tax base, to everything else, and staying in compliance with the comprehensive plan. I'll be here if you have any questions for me. I'm going to quit beating a dead horse at this point, and I ask you to please think about those uses and make a favorable recommendation on those uses to the county commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Lee? Comments? I've got one. I'd like to ask you a question. Have you ever thought about taking this building from a 2-story to a 1-story? I want to give you a scenario. There are a lot of people in this area, Monroe, on down to Waxhaw, that want to start their own business. And what you find is that there's maybe places that they can rent if they need a bricks and mortar, but you don't find something that's economical, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a small space. They put some of these in up in New York. They put what I'm about to say, they've got one that went in Waxhaw. It's called Millview. It's a 1-level building. They're small suites, anywhere from 700 to 900 square feet. And they're very economical. I believe they run anywhere from 7 to maybe 1,000. That might be 1,050 or 1,100, but they're not 2,000 and 3,000. To where a business can get started, get on the ground. There's not a lot of foot traffic in it because there's no major, nothing. It's not a big box. It's not anything that's going to attract a lot. The only thing that attracts a lot is the Polar Ice place, and that's kids and family, and it's neat to see how they have migrated to that. The question that I've got is, would they consider doing something like that? Number one, and then number two, have you thought about putting sidewalks along in front of the building, et cetera, and if handrails are necessary? Of course, that's a design deal, understand that, but just thinking out of the box on this, not saying we're going to build a building that's going to have 2 stories. Personally, the number one, according to the Monroe Chamber of Commerce, or Union County Chamber of Commerce, the number one animal hospital is Passionate Paws, right across the street. I don't think I would want to go in there if I was a veterinarian. To be honest with you, you got that competition right there. They've got a bigger space. They've got everything they need, as opposed to what this lot would have. And I understand, Lee, what you're talking about, the use aspect, but I think there needs to be a real strong analysis on this usage, and then working with whoever buys it to see if they can deliver that. They've got to know what they want in there and not just say, hey, let's go put a storage unit in. I understand the inside walking. There's one off of Ray Road, but it's a multi-big type operation next to a swim place that went in. But how much out of the box thinking has the client put into this other than just looking at a list that has been, it's like a menu to choose from. I hope I hadn't put you on the spot, Mr. Lee.
Well, to try to respond to your question, again, this is not a site-specific development plan.
I understand
The
that.
client is the owner of the property,
I understand
okay,
that.
and does not know what use that it will ultimately be put to. So what this zoning district would do is it would say, hey, if you buy this property, these are the particular uses you're allowed to have, okay? Personal opinion, you know, I think it's ideal for some type of a true office use. And if you look around at a lot of those suites, those buildings, that would look, I mean, they look like houses, you know, and they are 2 stories, and a lot of times you can have 4. You can break those down into small and have key man offices like you're talking about that are available for startups and that type of thing. But it is a small site, and there is, you know, there's an acre left. You're limited by the parking you're gonna have with any office space or anything else. And if you limit it to 1 story, they very well may. If there is a buyer that comes by and have a use, vet hospital, daycare, those type, they're gonna be 1-story building. But we have limited it to, it's a maximum of 2 stories and a maximum height of 40 feet because you get the pitch on those roofs. And some of the engineers and the builder types can give you a little better how they measure what the actual height of the building is. Because you go up to a lot of houses and they might say the average height of the different pitches here is this, but there might be one that's taller. You know, we are limiting it 40 feet, 2-story maximum. So you can't put in a 3-story storage building because it's not allowed in that zoning use. But that is what we're asking for here, Mr. Chairman, is a zoning classification that is limited only to these uses, but we do not have that end user. We don't have that person coming in and saying, we want to buy this property to do this on it. Will you go get a site-specific approval for that? What we are asking is, can we do this that meets within the plan, and we'll restrict and try to be as, you know, as cordial as we can be to the adjacent property owners, make it as a compatible use as possible. And will you allow us then to go out and market and sell that property so that the property owner can realize that value instead of the developer? And that's the request that's before.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other
Any other
questions?
questions, comments?
I think your idea is a great idea, because there are a lot of, especially now, a lot of small businesses that are looking to start up. And as I said in the last meeting, there aren't a lot of uses for the space, and once the road gets widened, there are going to be even fewer. So to respect the people that are currently living in the subdivision, when you say a 2-story building or the potential of a 2-story building, my mind automatically goes to a huge big box. And, you know, personally, to look out my back window or sit on my back porch staring at a big box, I don't care if it's a half-a-foot candle of light, it's light, and it's a box, and that's the concern I think that you're running up against, Mr. Lee, is that you're almost kind of putting the cart before the horse and giving people a lot of ammunition to say, I don't want this in my backyard, literally in my backyard. And I think if you were able to redefine a little bit of the building envelope, to make it look like a residential facility, to make it look like something that a neighbor could look out their back door or sit on their back porch and go, hey, you know what, it looks like a house. Feels like a house, behaves like a house, doesn't have to be a house, but at least you're putting people a little bit more at ease, knowing that, you know, there isn't something out there that's going to be, you know, a 40-story block wall, because I'll guarantee you 99% of the people that are sitting to your left are thinking 40 feet a block, and that's, you know, I think that's the problem, is that it's creating an image and a scare tactic, if you will. Not that you're doing it intentionally, but creating a fear in people that says there's too many possibilities for a potential to sell a piece of property. So.
Thank you, Robert. Any other Questions or comments for Mr. Lee?
No, but I would like to ask Mr. Jensen, what's the total amount of square footage building that would be allowed on 1 acre? And I know you had taken consideration the parking and the screening area and all that, but what size building can they build?
I mean, it's really hard to say, because you've got your setbacks that you have to apply. You've got the area that's gonna come out of that property for the, future right of way. So you're left with, I think when you take out the future right of way, you're left with around 1 acre, but then you've gotta pull your building setback, so you're 25 front and rear, and I think 15 on the side or 20 on the side. So you pull that out. Then you have to, then it's really a calculus equation. So you're looking at the use, and you have to factor in what that use's parking requirement is. Because an office use would be much, I'm assuming, I don't have the ordinance pulled up and looking at that, but an office use would probably be much less than, say, an animal or a daycare center. So that's kind of factored into it as well. So that's going to be a big determinant of how big that building could be. So it would be really hard for me to tell you a maximum size building without fully knowing what the actual use might be. You have that laundry list of uses, and each one of those uses could have a different building size depending on their parking requirement. So I think I would be doing you guys a disservice if I threw out just some random number, because that's really what it would be.
Any other comments?
Now, I do want to point out, of course, you're not to any point of making any kind of decisions, but obviously one of your options here is to discuss with the applicant things that you do feel would be acceptable for the planning board to support this request. Or deny. If you deny it, you recommend denial, whatever. But if you have items that you feel are something that would help you support the request, now's the time for you to discuss that, obviously, with the applicant, or after, of course, you hear from the residents and what their concerns are. But this meeting is where you can discuss those things. You can talk about limiting height. You can talk about limiting building size. Those are things that you have the option to discuss. Now, ultimately, it comes down to what you want to recommend to the board. This is not a decision-making board. You make a recommendation. That's all you do. And the county commissioners make the decision. So I don't want you to forget that you have other avenues here if there are things that you feel would make you support the project, or if there isn't anything that makes you support the project, that's fine too. I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
I think I asked the question before, and I'm going to ask it again. Up to this point in time, any conditional rezoning we did was a site-specific plan with a specific use. This is the first time that we will give somebody carte blanche. Is that correct? Inside of that classification, office use, without a site-specific plan or without a specific use.
So there was one example of where there was a PUD that I recall, and that was the site there at Airport Road in 84. They had gotten a PUD designation, which allow for B2 zoning in that area. And the B2 is everything in B2. There were no limitations within that. They decided to come back and remove that PUD designation because PUD really doesn't exist in our ordinance anymore. It was a legacy district. And in order to sort of make it easier for them and also for us, they went through and changed the zoning on those properties to sort of the underlying categories. And that particular corner, which was B2, they did not submit a site-specific development plan. They had a laundry list of uses that they requested. Now, it's a little bit different in, it already had the PUD designation, which gave them all those uses, but that was an example of where an approval was given to them for conditional rezoning with a laundry list of uses and no site-specific development plan. That's the only one I can recall at this point. I can't remember that you've seen anything that's been not a true site-specific development plan other than that one.
But everything so far has been a site-specific plan,
To
and
my
that's the
knowledge.
reason we gave them the rezoning.
That is, to my knowledge, yes, sir.
And with all deference to Mr. Lee and your clients, it bothers me that they do have the, that we make a conditional rezoning, and there could be animal services there could be a veterinarian service there. That does trouble me, because I would like to know what's going on the property if we're going to conditional rezone it. That's the crux of this whole issue, I think, because everything else that we have done has been a site-specific plan at this point in time. And, yeah, please, go ahead. And we're just having dialogue
We could
here.
have come in and asked just for a straight B2 rezoning, which would allow all these uses in a laundry list of other uses within here. Our thought process for doing it this way with the office conditional was to limit those uses so we're not coming and getting such a broad category. Again, the zoning ordinance provides a list of different zoning classifications, zoning districts, of which you can do a straight rezoning and apply for. And what our conditional rezoning is doing is actually limiting those uses. We're not saying, here, we're saying we want office, but there are a whole lot of uses that are allowed in the office zoning district that we're not asking for. B2 will allow all of the uses that we want in our list with nothing, with just a straight rezoning. It also allows retail and a lot of other functions that we thought would not be good for this piece. So I think, I understand the desire for everyone to say specifically, this is what has to go on each piece of property. But again, as someone representing a property owner, I want them to have as many viable uses for that property as they possibly can have to go out there while still trying to respect. And look, I will gladly listen. I can't answer your question specifically about the square footage that you were asking about earlier, because I've asked the design engineer that question. I said, I'd love to be able to say, this is how many. It depends on the building you're putting there, the parking turning radius is how it's set. There are too many factors to look at. But I can tell you, look, if it comes in to be an office building, there's gonna be no way you can get more than 10,000 square feet put into a building that's 2 stories and be able to have adequate parking. So if there's something along those lines that y'all feel we should include, I'd be happy to recommend that to my client and maybe amend our application to put a maximum square footage or something on the application. We would like that input, but we are, it is a calculation that has to be done. I can't tell you specifically what it is. I can tell you that you can't put a 40,000 square foot building on a 1 acre tract. It's just not going to happen, and we've already limited that to 2 stories, so you're only going to get so much. So with that, I'll leave. If you have additional questions, I'd be happy to address them, but I hear what you're saying, and I don't know how to address other than to tell you what our motivation is and how we are going about this rezoning, what we're asking for.
Mr. Lee, if I might ask a question while you're up there. First of all, Robert, I appreciate your comment a minute ago, as I do Everett's. I guess I too agree with what he said. If I was a property owner looking at the back, out my back, and I saw this 2-story building, it would be, if I had to look at one of the two, I'd rather have a 1 level. Does that make sense? That's the reason that I brought that example up to you. And it is in a semi-commercial residential section that that I was talking about, et cetera. And I've got a real personal problem, as Everett does, with a dog run, a veterinary clinic right there. That would drive me up the wall. You know, with dogs running up and down, out barking and whatever they do, et cetera, so forth and so on. And so, and I have to say, I voted for it last time. But I've had, and I don't know what I'm gonna do tonight, 'cause we haven't heard from the residents yet. But I just know that we have got to make our decision based on the rules and regulations that we've been given and handed by land use, by zoning, et cetera, some common sense in there somewhere, to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. And this is not an easy decision, whether it's on your side or on the residents' side. And also, I appreciate you allowed us to question you and talk to you. It's not like we're playing 20 questions or spin the bottle or anything like that. But I do appreciate it, sir.
Well, thank you, Don. And the only point I would make is it's R40 now, and you can build a house. And there are no architectural review on that house. And I don't know if you ride up and down Secret Shortcut right before you get to Barbie Farms, but it was a childhood friend of mine's house that sits right there that has the big dome front deck they built in and put those things under. I mean, you know, there are a lot of things, if you don't own the property, you might not like what you're looking at. And I know that's hard, a hard pill to swallow, but you know, that's where we are. And I can't, you know, on behalf of my client, I don't think we can limit it to the point where we're gonna say, well, we're gonna build a one level, 25 square foot entrance to the underground parking deck there.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm not a real estate agent or a land developer, it seems to me that if it were left as is, marketing that property would be a little bit easier because you can attract all interested parties, whether they want to build a hotel or a single-story building, and then filter out what the appropriate use would be. But to come to the board with a specific site plan that says, we vetted however many candidates, however many potential interested parties there were, and now we're coming to you with a specific plan, you would have a much better idea of what the community reaction is, how it will fit on the property, and ultimately lead to a viable use for that property, which is going to help you, going to help your client, and ultimately satisfy the residents. What am I missing in that scenario, I guess?
Well, typically what you have at that point in time when you're marketing that piece of property, you have a piece of property that's zoned R40 that you're taking out, and you're asking people to come in and submit plans. And then they would come into you with a contract that would have a very extended due diligence period on it, which they're gonna tie your property up for how many months when they're coming down here trying to get this done. And then maybe they get it, maybe they don't. Maybe they get it and their demographic study comes back and says, we don't want that use there, and they pull out during that due diligence or that rezoning period. And usually it takes, most of those contracts are anywhere from 7 to 12 months in duration to get going to get that point. What this is they can go out and market that property and say, here are the specific uses which you are allowed to have. You go look, I mean, just go look at the listing prices of property that are listed commercial, and go look at properties that are listed, you know, potentially commercial. It does make a difference, because now that applicant, you know, if I represent some commercial company that's going out and building these properties, what I'm doing is I'm going out and looking for sites. And then we would have on-staff people that come in, put together the engineered drawings that they're gonna pay for. They're gonna pay somebody to come up and do what I'm doing, stand here before you and try to make a presentation to the planning board, the commissioners, do all of those things. All of that money then is spent by the applicant. That's coming out of that purchase price from the buyer. And they don't know if they're gonna get it done or not. Y'all have seen plenty of those. One comes to mind that was on 200 South. way through through that method.
And I understand that for, I'll say, normal commercial property or, I guess more of a standard rezoning. This is kind of an oddball. I mean, this isn't your everyday parcel of land that you can easily look at it and go, you know what, we see the development here. This is a pretty skinny window that you're trying to fit through. So I guess that's why I'm asking that question is, it almost seems like, in this instance, the process sort of needs to work a little bit differently to try to achieve an optimal outcome for everyone. That's, I mean, it's just my observation. I don't know that, again, I'm not a land developer, I'm not a realtor, but just kind of looking at it from a different perspective, it just seemed like it would be counterintuitive to how you're proceeding with it.
Any other comments from Mr. Lee?
No, I guess I agree with a lot of what these gentlemen are saying. I guess my issue would be if the owner came with a specific project tonight, go build a one-story office building, come with us, we could put conditions on that structure then. We could put design conditions on it, we could put all these conditions on it, then they can go sell that building. And I think that would be the better way to go, is go ahead, pay to build a building there, or try to get a zoning for a site-specific building. You know, I mean, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but one of my concerns when I hear about this is the right in, right out. I mean, that to me, if you're gonna have a daycare, then everybody leaving that daycare that's going south has gotta go north, go into some residential property or somewhere, turn around, now come back south. I don't know. I think it's just too early for the project personally, but those are my comments. And you know, I certainly can appreciate your position standing up there, and I can appreciate the owner's desire to get the most value out of their property. I'm all for, you know, heck, I hope I can get the most value out of my property when I go to sell it. So I hope they do, but perhaps maybe coming in with a project in mind that actually is site-specific would help. That's just my...
Chris, thanks for those comments. Brian, back to you before Mr. Lee sits down. I think we've discussed what the possible uses of this. Maybe not in great depth as maybe you wanted or expected, but I think when it comes down to it, what I'm hearing is there's some thoughts on a one-story building, not a two-story. I'm hearing take this list and take it down and take off, think like the property owners. Do you want to be a person that's selling it that is a good neighbor?
Okay.
You know, you have to live with yourself at the end of the day. And to sell something just to make the almighty dollar and to say heck with the neighbor or neighbors or neighborhood or whatever it is, that's pretty, I just don't think that's what they call the golden rule. And that's what I grew up with. I'm so old. And all. But I really would like to see, and if we have to do it, getting 3 or 4 of us together to talk about this, maybe that's legal, maybe it's not legal. But I think there needs to be further discussion on this, Brian. I really and truly do.
So,
I just don't, there's got to be one way to appease everybody.
well,
If it's not,
I
then-
don't know that you can appease the neighborhood, so I wouldn't go that far.
All right.
I think, number one, they're here and they might want to speak.
They're going to speak.
But to that point, I think this process, because it's been remanded back to you, this is how I see this playing out. I see that the planning board would make a recommendation, whatever that recommendation is. And your recommendation, and I'm gonna give some what ifs. Your recommendation may say, listen, Mr. Applicant, we want you to reduce this building to 1 story. We want you to set some square footage limitations, and we want you to do only these uses. Now, the applicant hasn't agreed to them. Let's just say that the applicant says, okay, I can't really say that we agree or disagree with these at this point in time, but that's the recommendation that comes from the planning board. The applicant has really a choice at that point in time. It can move forward back to the commissioners with this revised recommendation from the planning board saying, these are the things we think that you need to consider in making a decision on this, and the applicant can say, this is why we don't want to do those things and why we don't agree with them. Well, the applicant could ultimately say, listen, we agree, we're okay with that. Or the applicant can say, listen, rather than move forward, I want to come back to you with some changes. Ultimately, a recommendation comes from this board, and then the applicant has to decide what they do from there.
Okay.
So, do we understand the process? So I think you've brought up some very good points, and if the board feels strongly that there are new conditions to be considered, the applicant really needs to decide whether those conditions are acceptable for his client.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lee, thank you. I'm sorry I kept you up here so
I got one more
long.
question.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, sir, Patrick.
In the land use history, it says that it's been a single-family residence since 1950. Is this well and septic, or is it city water and sewer?
There's sewer availability and water availability to this site. I cannot specifically answer that question. I could call and find out, but this would be, any development would be sewer and water. Both are available to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have anybody here from the neighborhood that would like to speak? Yes, sir. If you'd come up and give us your name and
Thank you,
address.
Mr. Chair. My name is Robert Consoli.
Okay,
I'm the new president of the HOA of Chatsworth. And we were here before, before the planning board and the commissioners. I'd like to thank, I think it's Mr. Medlin, I believe in the December 5th video, YouTube video, you were very complimentary. I guess you looked at the video of the commissioners meeting, and you were very complimentary of our group. You said we were well prepared, so I thank you for that. And you didn't know my father-in-law's, he's deceased now. It's S. Orrin Starnes. His name is outside on the placard. 1972, he's one of the first commissioners in Union County. And he was a champion of zoning rights. He was one of the first, he and I guess 5 or 6 other fellows put in the zoning rights. So we're gonna try to do this in a timely, orderly fashion. We have, if everybody doesn't mind standing, I just want you to realize we have 20 of our 78 residents here. Not everybody can make it, we have children and everything else. But everybody here is very concerned and very interested because we live there. Now, thanks. I don't know how many of you were able to just ride through our neighborhood and go through the cul-de-sac, but this would be the opportune time to do so, because when you go there, you see directly to Providence Road, just about. You can't quite see Providence Road because it's uphill and goes down. But there's 9 homes that see this property, and it's not very sightly. So I'm going to speak, but I'm going to speak in a little bit. So I'd like to ask Dick. Do you want to get up first and speak? Thank you, sir.
thank you.
I'm Dick McGinnis, one of the residents. One of the things I find puzzling is council here says it's not site-specific. And yet we've asked them, what about the traffic survey? Well, we don't have to do a traffic survey because it's going to be less than 100 cars. Well, how could he tell us it's less than 100 cars if it's not site-specific? He doesn't know what's going in there. He doesn't know what the traffic's going to be. And it's kind of like in your face. He said about we can see the building. If you go up to the cul-de-sac, get a time, drive up there, this thing's going to pop out. It's just like, like putting a doghouse in your front lawn. It's ugly. Now, let me go back to what I originally started out with my notes about. When we were here last time, somebody said that at the conclusion of the meeting, when you voted, it was 3-1 to pass it on to the commissioners. And I forget who it was, said about Warren Buffett made a comment that if you like a piece of property and you bought it from the View, you ought to buy the View. That was me. That was you. Yeah, well, you know what? I thought about that, but none of us are Warren Buffett. And we have elected officials who protect us from that. So we don't need Warren Buffett's money, but we do need our elected officials to do what they're supposed to do and protect us. You guys zoned it at R40 to start with, and now all of a sudden somebody wants to change it just for convenience. Now, one of the things we're going was a little old lady that's lived there for 30 years. Well, she doesn't live there anymore. I think she's in heaven or perhaps some other location, but she's not there. I took a picture of the lady, the applicant, whatever her name is. I drove out to her house. It's not shabby at all. What?
Charlene Carter.
Yes. Now, you lead you to believe that she's rubbing nickels. Well, if she's rubbing nickels, I like to rub some of them with her. It's a nice house, and I don't begrudge her the house, but she's doing it for her own personal benefit to the detriment of 37 other people. And we find it really offensive. Also, were you at the, I don't know, it was Brian Matthews at the commissioners meeting. Were you there to closing remarks? You gave the closing remarks to the commissioners, did you not?
Did I say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Did I date them?
I said, do you make the closing remarks to the commissioners?
I did, sir, yes, sir.
Why did you make a, they didn't even need the attorney with you there. You made such a pitch to the commissioners about approving it. Everybody thought you were on the table.
Well,
I know you're not, but that's the way it came across. So you did a better job than he did. So anyway, that's all I have. Okay.
Thanks, Dick.
all right.
I'm Curtis Blackwood, and I live over in Chatsworth. I know James Allen, and actually he's a very good attorney because I used him on occasion, and he did a really good job for me. So, he's paid to present the point of view of whoever's employed him. I would like to bring up a few things. The people that own the piece of property in question, somebody said something about motivation. Well, $750,000 would be pretty good motivation for me. But they also sold off the farmland that had been with that for development, for housing. Now, it's nice to make money, but I personally have a problem when you make money selling something to one group of people for one thing and then turn around and shaft them to make more money on another. I'd also like to point out that these are not average houses. I don't mean to be whatever, but the taxes that we pay over there are rather hefty. And I'm not complaining about the taxes, because if I bought the house, I expect to pay the taxes. But I'm not sure that devaluing the property that you've got over there, and the subdivision next to us is also very expensive houses. And you have housing all the way down the road, except for back up where you had commercial way back when you had the little brick grocery store, gas station there on the corner of Providence and 84. And then I see your circle there. Now, way back, and I'm not opposed to James Allen, I've seen it. My regret is when I thought $5,000 an acre was too much for the land up at Weddington, if I'd only been stupid enough to buy a bunch of it. But I talked to a boy whose parents ran the little concrete block store there on the corner. And of course, that part was grandfathered because it had been commercial all along. And I see the circle, and the circle comes up to cover the church right across the street from this. And then, as you pointed out earlier, a bunch of that property over there is in Marvin, and I think Marvin does their own zoning. So, and then when you come down to the park below this, you have a creek with the floodplain right down there below it near the corner, and then there is a high tension power line coming through it. So you're not looking, unless somebody's going to spend a lot of money, at doing much on that corner unless they can figure out a way to go around. And if you're widening those two roads, the highland there is going to be greatly diminished. When we came, we're like everybody else. the biggest expenditure that most people make is to buy their home. And people made this investment based on their belief. And somebody said last time I was stupid because I believe the county commissioners and so forth. But when I came to Union County, zoning had just been implemented, and I came in '73, so the gray hair is legitimate. They told us, and I liked Orion Starnes. He was a really nice man, by the way. He lived down in the Prospect community, and I was principal of Prospect. This was to protect the individual property owners, so we wouldn't have surprises dropped on us. Prior to the zoning, you could have any business or whatever you wanted to put next door to somebody else's house. It's a chicken house. And some of you may remember the grain bins right down 74 from Monroe, 75, I'm sorry, from Monroe. And they wanted to tear them down because of a zoning problem. And the guy said, well, that's fine, I'll just put a hog parlor in if that's what you want. And miraculously, the big grain bin stayed right there. But we want to be treated fairly. We came in expecting everything was zoned and that we should be protected with our investment. And there's one family that just spent $1 million or better buying a home right behind there. Now that's a big kick in the teeth to make that kind of a lifetime investment. And they chose to come to Union County. They could have gone other places. So I really hope that you will be fair to these people that have made a major lifetime investment in Union County and have chosen to come here and live here and make their investments here. So that's what I've got to say. I surely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Paul Shivers. I live right on the cul-de-sac that's being spoken of. And I actually have a couple of simple visual effects here if you guys would be interested in looking at. Yeah, we don't need these back. But a lot of people have made comments about, would you want this in your backyard? But if you look at the photo there, for my family and the Baroni family, it's not in the backyard, it's in the front yard. So about 40 yards away across the cul-de-sac, on a lot that looks almost like a part of our neighborhood, there's a proposal for a business to be built, which we find disturbing, troubling, and probably very costly. I believe the comment before was she deserves to profit from her property. She deserves to make money off of this. But if you look at the proximity of the homes in that photo, and just out of that photo are 3 or 4 others in direct view, I can almost guarantee that all of those people are going to lose at least the amount of money she's going to make in the value of our homes. It's created a ton of turmoil in my family because we've only been there for a couple of years. We love the home. But we're thinking now, well, before this happens, should I sell and leave? You know, just because of this. The list of potential uses, most of those exist already within 100 yards of that site. There's a veterinary office, there's a storage unit on the other corner. There's a CVS, there's a bank, there's all that stuff over there already. And I understand change, but I somehow don't believe that some of those advocating me just accepting that change would welcome such a thing in their own homes, you know? I mean, tough nuts, we're gonna build a business right outside your house. But I suspect those who are advocating would argue against that if the same thing was happening at their property. So if you wouldn't mind taking a look at those photos so you can see that this is a real life problem for us. It's right in my front yard. And it's even worse for others. There are 2 building lots that are unsold right next to that, which will have no value because they will never be sold, with a business right next to it. So I appreciate your time. and your consideration, please take a look and think about the people who live there and what we're dealing with, worried about this project.
Mr. Shivers, could I ask you a question? Are these, sir? Yeah, that's okay. Do we have permission to ask Brian to put these pictures as part of the file on this?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay?
Those are free for you to keep.
If you need them back, I totally
No,
understand.
we have copies.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Again, my name's Robert Casoli, president of the HOA. So, we're represented by Melanie Cox. She's helped us out. I'm sure all of you know her name. We asked her to help us because, you know, I'm a retired businessman, and I didn't, like you, I didn't work in real estate, and I've never worked in government, so there's a lot of things I don't know that we're going through tonight. But anyway, Melanie sent me this email, which I'm sure all of you have seen. It's from Richard Jensen, and it's been discussed tonight, all these different uses. Well, I'm not going to be critical of this. I'll let Mr. Lance Simpson of the commissioners look at this, because I was at that meeting on, I think it was December 18th. I was the only one who was there from our subdivision. And he was quite specific. He said, this thing's too overly broad. I don't know what they want to put here. So then they come up with this. I mean, it was like if I gave somebody who worked for me before, I said, business plan doesn't seem to make sense. Let's revise it so we can, you know, make a little bit more profit. And then they whitewash it and give it back to me. Out the door, and don't let it hit you. So I don't quite understand that, but again, it's not my opinion. I'll let Mr. Lance Simpson, who brought it up several weeks ago. And again, I don't want to belabor this. We've spent a lot of time here tonight. So I wrote to each one of you an email on January 4th talking about the conditional zoning, who I am, and various points. I don't think it's, did you all receive this to acknowledge? Great. So the only thing I would like to, again, reiterate what Curtis said, is there's 37 homeowners, 70 some odd voters. We pay about $250,000, give or take, in just real estate taxes, just that alone. So that pays a lot of salaries, or helps pay salaries in Union County. A big concern is the potential diminution in the value of our property. And if as Curtis said, if the property values recede, so do the taxes to the communities. And you know how comps go. It takes a little while to dig in, but you know, all of a sudden somebody's got to sell their house and it's down, and then it permeates through the whole neighborhood. The real estate, all due respect to real estate agents, they seem to use that as that's their point of least resistance. If you know, I can't get you more than what the comps are in your neighborhood. So that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt people. But now, what should be paramount to all of us is security and safety. I don't know how many of you guys travel on Providence Road, but try it from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. right now. Forget when there's more, you know, there's more construction going on in different areas, more home building going on. Our road going south into Waxhaw starts backing up at Ray Road on the north about 3 o'clock. And I don't know if you guys know Ennis Road. I'm from New Jersey. I keep telling them, why don't you put a jug handle there? You know, alleviate some of the traffic, but you know, that'll never happen. So, but I've been here 30 years, so I've kind of acclimated. So what do you think is going to happen with more construction? Then we're going to widen this road. And as James Allen said, the property can only have a right in and a right out. What do you think that's going to do to traffic? And there's enough accidents. I don't know. We can all look at the police records, but I heard there was 11 accidents alone, at least last year. And I have seen people go into our cul-de-sac already and turn around. Because anybody were to use this particular property, let's say it's just an office, pull out. Well, like all of us, they're gonna find the least resistance. Oh, there's Chatsworth, Scoot and Chatsworth. What about the Chatsworth school children? And what about the cars coming in and out of Chatsworth? So that's a problem. Myself as a businessman, I see no economic benefit or justification to the Chatsworth homeowners, the community, or the county that can be made from developing such a minor parcel. And Lee got up and, you know, had that map up there with the circles rolling around. Well, you know, statistics, numbers can be weighted. If we did a weighting on the city, on the central part of it, based on the number of acres that are right around that Providence Road and Newtown, that would bring that circle down, maybe 200-300 yards, or at least 100 yards, because all the concentration of commercial, which kind of fits into the community. You have Java's, the bank, a school, proper parking, and as Melanie kind of pointed out in her letter to the commissioners, which I believe all of you have received, right? This letter here, so I'm not going to read this thing. They all have dual access. You can get in on Providence Road, you can get out on Providence Road. You can get in on Newtown Road, you can get out on Newtown. Now, I can't speak for the Publix and all that land that's going to be on the southeast corner. But think of I don't know how many acres that is, but it's got to be a lot. And, you know, to James Allen's point, well, it's good use of it. I mean, yeah, things are changing. But look we have massive infrastructure building now. You look at Waverly, and then right across from Waverly behind the Ilias Mochas and the Harris Theater, there's a massive, it's like a city being built back there. So why would anybody want to even mess with this infinitesimal piece of land that you can only build a small, you know, something small based on, you can only have so many, you have to have so many parking spots for every office, you know, the formula is what I'm sure these guys do. And the safety of it. I mean, to me, it's not even good payback, because it has to be only, if it goes down to only be one story, I'm not sure it's going to be valuable to anybody. There's open real estate in Waxhaw, and in Charlotte, and in other parts of Union County. So it's kind of like, I mean, the only thing I can tell you is, to me, it's a realtor gets somebody's ear, says what they can do, they see how much they can get for something that's idle land. It is idle land. I mean, you know, these people should have sold it to the developer. Because Curtis made the point, but I don't think he told you, the farmland he was referring to was Chatsworth. So, unless I'm wrong, maybe James Allen, what?
You are wrong.
Oh, we are wrong, okay, so it's not them, okay.
And point of clarification, my client's grandmother, or her mother lived in that house. Grandmother lived in the house that's over. She did sell the land where Victoria Lakes subdivision is.
Okay.
Her house that she has in Laxall has been made as top, I think that's tax value about $273,000. She is not a wealthy lady. She did sell the land where Victoria Lakes subdivision is. It was her family property. But
We can't hear what you said. It's worth how much?
the tax value is $270 something.
Really, you've got a bargain.
Yeah. I mean,
Doesn't have the location.
you know, it's, if you look at it this way, whatever, if it's even reasonable to put something there, you know, is it at the jeopardy of 37 homeowners? You know, I mean, it's been like that for a long time. And, the only thing, and again, I'm not an attorney, James Allen's an attorney, but Melanie has mentioned here several times in citing court cases in and around North Carolina where something like this ultimately falls in a spot zone, which in many cases has been deemed illegal. And, you know, some of the criteria, it just kind of falls right in line. Size of the tract, well, the siting in question was bigger, much bigger than this little piece of land. That was considered spot zoning. Compatibility of the zoning action in the comprehensive zoning point. Well, you know, like I said, that zoning plan can move real easy. You can make it look whatever you want it to be. I mean, it just covers that very edge of it. But if you weighted it, you know, statistically, based on how many acres are actually in commercial zoning, it would drop down. The benefits and detriments resulting from the zoning action for its owner of the newly owned property, his neighbors, and the surrounding community. Well, we are almost certain it won't help us, won't be of any value to us. It'll probably lower our values, plus it'll have potential safety and traffic concerns. And the relationship between the uses envisioned under the new zoning and the uses currently present in all adjacent tracts. Everything surrounding this area is all R40. So I'm just trying to put a dart in a particular area. So gentlemen, I appreciate you listening to me. We have one more speaker, and I would hope that you would consider denying this rezoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Denise Matrusis. I'm also a Chatsworth homeowner and the former HOA president or board president. And a couple things I'd like to mention. Dick McGinnis, who was up here a little earlier, who gets very passionate about a lot of things, was on the board for many years. And I can assure you that during meetings when he was on the board, there was never a dull moment. But he always brought up a lot of good points, and he kept the meeting interesting and usually pretty long. So once we got rid of him, our meetings went down to about an hour. But please don't sell his passion short, because he is only expressing the passion that all of us as homeowners feel. The other thing I'd like to bring up before I kind of summarize everything is that there was a statement about the sewer access, and in fact, the sewer access for this particular property, irregardless of what it is into Chatsworth. That's how it'll have sewer access. So let me kind of summarize everything on behalf of the homeowners. Many of the points of which you've already discussed tonight, and that's been great to hear that, quite frankly. I actually watched that video from your meeting in December. And one of the things that Brian Matthews mentioned at that particular meeting, which I thought was very important, and I think we all think is very important, is that you vote your conscience. And we agree with that. So what I want to do is kind of summarize where we are, and I will do this quickly. I wrote this all out, so you have to listen to me no matter what. So anyway, tonight's the fourth public meeting on this application. From our perspective, meaning Chatsworth homeowners, the financial, safety, and environmental concerns expressed by the Chatsworth homeowners have been superseded by the desires of the owner, Charlene Carter, and the applicant, James Allen Lee. The rezoning request is inconsistent with the zoning goal, as stated in North Carolina statutes, of promoting the general welfare for all property owners. 1425 Providence Road, which is the property we're talking about, has been zoned R40, we've talked about this, since the start of zoning in Union County. It has over 47,480 square feet of property after subtracting the projected square footage for the widening of Providence Road. The remaining square footage is greater than R4 zoning requirement, and a single-family residence, and we've talked about this, could be built with no closer proximity to Providence Road than several houses in Chatsworth. We've expressed on several occasions, both in writing and verbally, tonight as well, our concerns regarding the zoning change from residential to office and the negative impact on our homeowners. In addition, the rezoning commission, and this has been talked about in a lot of detail earlier, so I'll go through it very quickly. In addition, the rezoning submission has minimal detail on the proposed office building. The only building statistic that has been presented is the height, which is not to exceed 40 feet. That's been brought up earlier. The list of requested uses grows as well. As James Allen mentioned, this notion of a storage facility has been added, and a statement about animals or a condition that animals in outdoor runs for exercise or for bathroom breaks must be attended at all times. Going back to the entire discussion about having veterinary services and outdoor dog runs and so on and so forth. There's been no Department of Transportation input because there's not enough specificity on the building to be able to even review with the Department of Transportation. So we don't know anything about ingress, egress, the number of cars, so on and so forth. And all that's been discussed. As noted in the planning staff report, since this is a conditional rezoning request, the district is bound by all conceptual plans and conditions approved as part of the process. And this has, again, been discussed extensively by all of you as it relates to the number of uses and the fact that they're not specific. If approved as submitted, the owner and applicant have an open-ended opportunity with minimal county oversight as to the site development and proposed building occupants. Bob already mentioned spot zoning, so I'm not going to go into that. Our lawyer has looked at it. I know that that's not part of your role, but we do believe this could fall under the spot zoning regulations in North Carolina. In conclusion, 67 Chatsworth owners live, work, pay their taxes, and buy goods and services in Union County. Many of them are here tonight. Many of these individuals, myself included, are the original owners of their homes. And many of them have been here for 10 plus years. So we're not a transient neighborhood of people just moving in and out. It's fair to say that neither Ms. Carter nor James Allen nor Gerald Heyman, the realtor they've brought on board to sell this property, is going to live in the office built on the site. We all live in Chatsworth, day in, day out, in many cases for many years. So for all the reasons that we've been talked about, verbally and in writing, everybody's passion that you heard tonight, we're asking that you, in fact, do vote your conscience and respectfully deny this rezoning request. And that is the end.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay. One quick question, Brian.
Yes, sir.
I heard a couple of people talk about this spot zoning issue. I personally have never seen that email.
Sure, that was an email was really sent to the county commissioners. I'm not sure that you were included on that email. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure, but it was sent to the county commissioners.
What was the thought on that?
That's my understanding that the attorney for Chatsworth had pointed out that she felt that this could rise to the level of that. That is a legal question. That is not necessarily a question this board needs to consider. Whether it's approved or denied, if there's a challenge, we would have to obviously determine at that point in time if there's a challenge.
Appreciate the clarification.
Yes, sir.
The board. Does someone else have a question? Gordon?
You gentlemen did or did not receive a copy of that letter? I would understood that it was emailed to each one of you.
I don't recall.
Your letter.
No, that's the one I sent.
The one he sent today.
The one that you sent?
The one I sent, but also the one Melanie Cox.
I'm talking about the one that Melody sent.
Yes.
When I raised my hand, I was showing you that we received this from you. This is your letter.
Yes. I only have one copy. And
That's okay.
I'd be glad to give it to you.
No,
We received your letter.
I want to make sure that I had not lost what y'all were talking about in that letter, because I had never seen it, so none of us have ever seen it, so it was not supposed to go to us, so that's all we need to know.
I'm not aware of who it was sent to. It went to the county
It was
commissioner.
sent to the
I sent-
County Commissioner.
That's correct.
But
Yeah.
I understood, unless I missed wrong, that this letter.
No, Ms. Cox had sent me the letter that was sent to the county commissioners,
She did?
and I forwarded it on to the board.
Oh, you did?
I don't recall
Yeah.
ever getting
Oh, so
it.
you
It's my
Sorry.
fault.
all did get a copy.
It's okay. Then it's my error. I must have deleted it or something.
No, yeah, I'm just
or
checking to
something.
see
Went
if,
into spam. I can't answer the
Glad to
question.
part with this if you want.
No problem.
My email probably goes to your spam box.
It does. When it says Dugan on it, yes, it does.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
All right, thank you, guys, I appreciate that. Thanks, Brian, I appreciate it. To the board, thoughts?
I just
Any
have
questions that
one
need to be asked?
question, and I don't know who the appropriate person would be to answer it. Bob, maybe you would be. Assuming that nothing is done with that piece of property, there's an existing house that may fall into disrepair. I understand that it's vacant or near vacant. What would your thoughts be then about this piece of property when there's a structure on it that's essentially in disrepair and falling apart?
Well, my understanding is that there's certain requirements in the county, community.
Actually, there are not.
Well, we don't have it.
There are no minimum housing code standards that will require that to be fit.
Let their house.
That is correct, yes, sir.
And Union County has no.
We do not have minimum housing code standards, no, sir.
You remember that house that's right next to that had that big junk pile out there
Yep.
for so long? It just stays there.
So if residents complain to Union County that they don't have any, they wouldn't do anything.
No, sir, we don't have any minimum housing code standards.
The owner, said owner of such property, would not have any reason to clean it up or demolish it.
I mean, certainly they'd have a reason to, but the county has no authority that we regulate that would force them to.
Well, we just have to leave it as it is, if it falls in, but it could become a safety problem, so we'd have to alert the fire department.
And I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because obviously, you know, we have a situation that you know, we're wrestling with here. And when you look at alternatives, and I'm trying to come up with some ideas that might be amenable to both sides, but certainly if I were a resident of Chatsworth, I wouldn't want to look at a 40-foot tall block wall, nor would I want to look at and abut a building that's in disrepair, falling apart, because it can't be sold, it can't be rented, it can't have any value. So, pardon me?
It's not falling apart.
Not today. I'm just saying that.
Well, our house isn't falling apart today either, but.
No, I'm not suggesting they are. What I'm saying is that at some point, if the property remains and maintains neglected, exactly. What would your thoughts be at that point? You'd have to come up because we can't hear you.
You're kind of going into my bailiwick. If the house was sold for a reasonable price, as it now sits on R40, it would rent and probably rent reasonably well. It's way too much traffic in the front to be an ideal location. But there's no problem, there should be no problem with, you know, you'd want to bring it up, and there are state codes that require you to be able to get it to, 60 degrees in all parts of the house. And then you could come under some state regulations so far as safety and so forth. But, you know, the house could be rented. Now, if somebody just wants to trash the value of their property, then you can have that happen. My daddy lived a long time, and he let a house over in Charlotte go. They came in and fixed it, and then we turned around and sold it. But you know, that's in a reasonable situation. That should never happen with this particular piece of property.
Well, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate because if the property is left unattended, if the zoning doesn't go through, the property is left unattended, essentially becomes a valueless piece of property if nothing can be built on it, and it does fall into disrepair, you now have a different scenario that is equally as unpleasant as, again, staring at a 40-foot tall block wall. So somewhere amongst those two extremes, I guess what I'm saying is there a compromise? Is there something that the residents of Chatsworth would be willing to accept as a compromise to both of those extremes?
Okay, well, I do rental property, and I have a fair amount. Russell has more than I have, so he could maybe speak with more authority, but I've been in close to 30 years. And, you know, that house appears from the outside, I haven't been in the inside, to be in good condition, and there's no reason, if somebody wanted to be reasonable about it, that it couldn't be sold. And I would consider buying it if the price met the criteria for what you could rent it for, and rent it myself. So for whatever that may or may not be worth. Thank you.
To clarify one point, just so you know, I appreciate you mentioning Russell, but he recused himself from any discussion on this tonight. Okay, so
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but anyway.
I want to make that clear.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just know Russell
I don't wanna put him
manages a
out.
good bit of rental property and has a lot of expertise.
He showed a lot of professionalism in what he did tonight, and we need to honor that.
Oh, it was no slam at anybody. I just
No problem.
acknowledging his expertise.
You know,
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would just say to Robert's point, I think what, you know, there's no guarantee that this property is not going to get rezoned in the future. I mean, there's nothing to guarantee that the property north of it, south of it, across the street's not going to get rezoned. Just because a property is zoned R40 doesn't mean at some point in time in its life it's not going to get changed. And you know, I understand that people move into the property with the thought that the neighboring property is going to stay what it was when they bought it. But there's never a guarantee out that it's going to happen. I think, you know, the concerns that Robert was talking about is, yeah, it might be something now that, you know, is not in disrepair and could rent, but they could walk away from that house and let it go to all get out, and, you know, next thing you know, you've got a house full of animals and rats and boards falling off. But
Not even walking away.
They could have done that anyway.
right,
I,
they can still do it.
these people own this land. Now, if they choose to fix it up and rent it, or choose to let it deteriorate, that's their choice. At some point in time, if it became a safety hazard, I would think that the police or the fire officials would have some concern about it.
Well,
That shouldn't be a concern of ours as far as.
or they could choose, as they've done tonight, to come ask for a different zoning classification. That's their choice too. And if their choice for a zoning classification meets with the board approval, again, what I'm just saying is that there is no guarantee that this property won't get rezoned at some point in time in its life.
You're absolutely right.
You know,
We'll be
so-
back here.
Right.
We would be back here again most likely. But it's an inconsequential piece of property in comparison to all the property all the commercial property just south of it. There's clusters of it. You can't even access this property by foot. Matter of fact, if any of you drive up Providence Road from Newtown, there's a median. The road's very narrow. And if you look over to the right, if you took your eyes off the road for a second, you would go into a ditch. I mean, I'm just surprised, I can think, is that a state road, is Providence Road a state road? I'm
Yes.
surprised the state hasn't put a barrier. I mean, excuse me? Oh,
I said, yes, it is a state road.
You could take your eyes off 1 second and you'd be in a ditch. It goes down probably 12 feet. So there's no place for a sidewalk right now. And to say there would be, well, maybe so, maybe not. But you can't ride a bike if you want to take your life in hands. No one could walk. Why would one, first of all, why would one walk from Java's or CVS up the street? It's absolutely no reason to do so.
Unfortunately.
Okay, board.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We have been given conditional rezoning as a tool for specific purposes at specific sites. And we're allowing a very broad band here at this point in time. We're not even voting on the style of building, the size of the building, or anything. Are we setting a precedent for allowing such a broad use in conditional zoning? I think that's my concern. I have no problem with an office building going there whatsoever. I really don't think that'd be the greatest neighbor they could possibly ever get. But it could be a veterinarian service, it could be a daycare service. We have no idea at this time, and that's not what really conditional zoning is all about. And I would have to say at this point in time that I would vote no for this rezoning petition.
Are you making a motion?
I'm not making a motion, I'm just throwing my 2 cents out.
So, just to clarify for the board, you're in a bit of a unique situation. There were only 4 members here present previously, so you actually have a larger group here. What recommendations you give are fully within your purview. You're not limited, but obviously there were some of you that were not present when the decision was made previously. So, you're not limited by what you want to recommend or how you may or may not wish to negotiate conditions. You're not really limited on that.
If I had a specific site plan, I would be willing to negotiate. At this point in time, we have too wide a range of uses in no site plan. I don't want to deteriorate or degrade the use of conditional rezoning because it is such a wonderful tool. We have fought to get it. I don't want to misuse it.
And I do agree with Everett. I think there is such a narrow opportunity for this piece of property that to allow such a broad range of uses would actually harm us going forward to be able to put conditions on. And I've been kind of sitting here brainstorming and looking at if we had to put some conditions around what would go there, I would have to insist that it be a 1-story building of some sort that looked very much residential, that would be limited to the height of a standard residential building, which 25 feet, 30 feet max, made of residential building materials on the exterior, and certainly the size of the building, I think, would have to be limited to 10,000 square feet or under, which would be an enormous home. Although there is a brand-new house on Ennis that is about 10,000 square feet that would offer a comparison. But those would be the conditions as far as the physical structure that I would have to put around it. But again, I think that without a specific use in mind, it's hard to vote yes to move forward with this project. I would actually, at this point, like to make a proposal that we deny the petition to rezone this and wait until there's a specific use brought forward.
Any other comments?
Is that a motion, sir?
That is a motion to deny.
Any other comments, Charles?
I have some conscious problems with it. I built 2 homes in Union County. Both of them, I've had some neighbors that weren't so good. And I still live in Union County, and I still am cordial with those neighbors. Even though they had old cars on my property, broken batteries on my property, all kinds of things. I had to put a 5-foot chain link fence up in between one of them just to keep him off, because he just wouldn't stay off. But I can see what your concern is. One concern that I have is you guys don't seem to have any concern for the homeowner, for the owner of this property right here. You don't seem to have a single solitary bit.
Back to the Warren Buffett again?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we know that's bull. You should have an HOA. You wouldn't have.
Sir, you do not need
Point
to
of
be
order,
Warren
Chairman.
Buffett to do anything in this property.
Sir, it's not that we don't have a concern. We have no problem with the way that facility is right now. It's R40, and we want it to stay R40. So they don't bother us with it one bit. Whether somebody rents it or they don't rent it, that's the owner's prerogative, right? I'm not telling the owner what to do, whether to rent their house out or not, but if they don't want to live there anymore, which obviously they don't, fix it up and rent it. Kurt's be happy to. But it's not that we don't have concern, but somebody's coming in that doesn't even live in our community, and they want to upset the apple cart and potentially diminish the value and put aesthetics in front of 9 homeowners, it's not very pleasing. I don't think that's.
I can
right.
understand that.
Well,
I've had that happen to me.
37 of us, to us, having concern for one of her.
Robert, I've had that happen to me. Everywhere I seem to go, I've had it happen to me.
Well, I'm sorry you've had those experiences.
Yes. But the thing that concerns me is this. Folks, this is not the end. You're gonna have a 4-lane highway there in just a couple of years.
So we need it.
Yes, you do. You do. That's gone from a very little quiet little community, and now you've got 20,000 trips going up in front and back of your entrance.
Trips now, so you just have it. one
Right.
lane that, you know, single file.
Right.
It'd be much, probably, that road may actually be, depending on the development of the area, may actually be smoother when it's 2 lanes going each way.
Well, probably would. Hope so, for your sake. But the thing is, I've never seen a 4-lane corridor that remains R40 along its edges. You're gonna have this come up over and over again. And the more the title changes on that piece of property, the worse it's going to be. And so, yeah, I think I would like to see if there was a way that you guys could work with the landowner to see if there was a way to help them utilize that property with a little bit higher use so that they could actually get value out of the
Best
property.
idea I've heard since I've been on this with our whole group, is Mr. Tropicana. I mean, the nice house was put there and we made into multiple offices. That might appease everybody. I'm not speaking for anybody behind me, but I'm saying, at least the aesthetics, be a nice looking house, have a backyard, the trees will still be the same.
I have a
It
concern
would
with,
look like a building,
Right.
a brick building.
I have a concern with that, with the use without a specific use. But I also know in trying to sell commercial property, that is very, very difficult to do that. And so you'd be a whole lot better off and you'd be able to sell the property much faster if you had a conditional use piece of property.
Did
So,
I just say?
yeah. And I myself would not see any problem with a nice, quiet business piece of property on that site. I can understand that you'd like to have a buffer on that site for your neighborhood. I can understand that. It would be nice if there were another home similar to yours on that piece of property.
We realize it can't be, it's too small.
Well,
Chairman, point of order. We could close the meeting, have the discussion amongst the panel here.
okay. Well, those are my
We need to move on,
concerns,
folks.
gentlemen.
We need
Those
to
are my
move on
concerns.
here.
I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but those are my concerns. And so I'm concerned that if this landowner doesn't get some different zoning, that they really don't have a piece of property that's valued of anything.
They voted. I don't even know on these properties.
We're gonna bring this meeting to a close, and everybody's gonna leave if we don't bring it back in order, okay? Don't shake your head, Mr. McGinnis. We're trying to be very nice to everyone. Okay, Charles, do you have any more comments?
No, that's it.
Okay, Patrick, you have any comments?
Not right now.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, we have a motion that's been put before us.
Do you have a second? I don't remember a
Excuse me,
second.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm up here trying to fix the recording device.
Let's wait.
I mean, we have a secondary recording device going, but I just wanted to get this, the battery died on it for some reason.
All right, we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're back now, ready to continue. We have a motion that's been put before us. Robert, you want to repeat that motion?
The motion was to deny the petition to rezone the property to from a R40 to a CZ until a specific plan has been presented to the board.
Motion has been made as discussed by,
I do need to clarify something so the board understands, and this is, you vote any way you want to. If ultimately the commissioners turn this down, there's a 12-month time limit of coming back for a rezoning of something similar. And so it would have to be significantly different for the board to reconsider that. Now, a site-specific plan might be enough to be considered specific, but I can't answer that question. Only the commissioners are the ones who can decide whether that is significant enough of a change for it to come back. That's not a reason for you to vote for or against. I just want you to make sure it's clear that's how this process works. It's not a matter of 3 months from now they want to come back and submit a plan. They have to actually be decided, does that plan, is that significant enough of a change for the board to call that a change that can go forward sooner than 12 months? So I think really your recommendation should be just motion to deny.
Exactly.
But that's just my opinion, and then it goes from there, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have said, if you come back to us, I would just say motion to deny, and then you vote on that matter.
Then I will amend my motion to just a motion to deny the existing petition
as presented, right?
as presented.
And I'll second it.
Okay, seconded. Thank you very much, Everett. We have a motion to deny. We ask that all those that are in agreement raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Are there any of those that want to vote for approval? If not, then the motion is denied. I'd also like to make one comment real quick, if I could. If you would please pass on that we did make a recommendation that this went to one level, and we discussed the uses of it, et cetera, so the Board of Commissioners know we did attack that, but we hit kind of a roadblock on it.
Certainly. And so what I want the audience to understand the process now is the applicant and his representative really have to, or her representative have to decide where they want to do. Do they still want it to go forward to the commissioners with a recommendation of denial, or do they want to try to modify their plan, or what do they want to do? At this point in time, we don't know. Once we know what that decision is, then obviously we will send another notice out to the property owners of what that hearing date will be. I'm sorry, what that date will be. It's not a hearing, it will just be a meeting, because the hearing has technically already been held. And the commissioners will make a decision at that point in time, if that's the decision of the applicant to move forward. So once we know something, we will notify adjacent property owners what we know at that point in time.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can a different residential zoning be asked to be submitted? I mean, if it's R40, could it R20, R30?
Absolutely. So that's different. So if someone came back, say, next month and said, well, I don't want it to be R40, I want it to be R20, that's different. That's not an office designation. So that's significantly enough they could ask for that. Yes, ma'am.
Then we want to continue with our meeting. I want to thank all of you folks that are here speaking on behalf. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Appreciate that. I would ask that when you exit the room here that you exit very quietly so we can continue on with item number 6. Okay? Thank you all and have a great Happy New Year.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, we have item number 6 to continue. And again, we apologize for this taking so long. Additional rezoning petition number 1709, requesting rezoning classification from R40 to R6CZ containing 3.5 acres, being tax map number 06198-005, located at Ray Road, being within the Sandy Ridge Township. Mr. Jensen.
again, as you stated, this is another conditional rezoning application, 2017-009. And it should actually, the way it was submitted, I think it's a little misstated on the agenda. It's actually, and the way it was applied for is correct. It's actually a partial, and I'll get into this, you'll see it in a minute on the staff report, but I want to make sure we're clear on what exactly we're doing here. It's actually kind of a dual, two hearings in one, if you want to call it that. Part of it is a conditional rezoning application, and part of it is a PUD amendment, and you'll see why in a second. These are some pictures, photographs of the property, and let me actually jump down to this piece real quick, to this slide, because this kind of points out where this is. This is on Ray Road, just over the county line from Mecklenburg County. So if you're on Ray Road coming off 485, cross the bridge into Union County, this property is immediately on your right. So you see it kind of highlighted there in white.
Does that butt up to 485?
No, sir. No, sir. This is 485 on Ray Road, a pretty good ways into Mecklenburg. So this is right next to, you'll see on this property, there's some development going on next to this. A little bit further down, if you're familiar with this area, is Tom Short, the intersection of Tom Short and Ray Road. So this is going back toward Mecklenburg County from the intersection of Tom Short and Ray Road. Yes, sir.
So there's a daycare center?
Yes, sir.
There's a property that's being built that we did that, and
Your eyes a little bit. That's the daycare center. That was approved, I don't know the year, that was approved a long time ago. The property that you see with the silk fence around it was the Rayfield project that you guys saw several months ago. That was a 35,000 square foot commercial development, had offices, retail, uses like that. So that's currently under development. Site plans are in for review. Actually, the site plans have been approved, and they've got the silk fencing up. They're ready to start building. This picture is looking from the road into the site, so that's kind of what the property looks like now. It's a lot of low, kind of small trees, some bigger trees toward the back. That's a picture of our rezoning sign, and looking toward Mecklenburg County. Another picture looking toward Mecklenburg County. Bottom left. Bottom center is looking across Ray Road, so Ray Road's 4-lane, divided right there. That's looking over toward the Somerset. There's a cul-de-sac in the Somerset neighborhood. There's some houses that back up to Ray Road. You can see one house. And this is another picture of Ray Road, kind of looking down toward the intersection of Tom Short. So as far as development status, this is showing that a lot of this property is undeveloped. And these things move around a little bit when development happens. So the area behind this shows that it's undeveloped, but this was produced as part of the Connect project, which was done a few years ago. This property at the time was undeveloped. It is now a subdivision that's currently being built. Part of this is large lot, I think it's called Tullamore. It's large lot development, and part of it is Amber Meadows, which I'm not sure if it's age restricted or not, but I know it's age targeted. And those are in the town of Marvin. Everything else in that general area is fairly well developed, except the piece here at the corner of Tom Short and Ray Road, and we lovingly refer to that as the old Walmart site, where we had a famous special use permit here years ago.
Dick Black took years off of his life. Years off of his life.
Nearly 42.
Still sitting there ready to go.
The current zoning in the area, you see a good mix of stuff out here. The red indicates commercial zoning, The kind of orange color indicates medium density zoning, and the yellow and green indicate low density zoning. So you've got some of that low density divided between unincorporated Union County and the village of Marvin. And a lot of that has to do with the PUD, and I'm going to get into a little bit of detail on that in just a minute. As far as the plan goes, this area near the intersection of Tom Short and Ray Road is designated as a small community center. That's a center that should go up to, I believe the plan calls for about 600,000 square feet, 400,000 square feet of commercial, retail, and office uses. Pretty much the entire four corners there have some sort of entitlements or permits associated with them. The corner kind of that I'm hovering over now is where the Kohl's is. So there's a Kohl's, there's a CVS, there's a small retail strip out front. That's being developed. And later on, as the number 8 on the agenda, there's a small little modification being made to that you'll see in a little bit, but not part of this one. The old Walmart site currently has a special use permit in place for, Brian, 240,000 square feet of retail. Across the street, kind of where I'm hovering now, there is a swim club and a 3-story Morningstar indoor storage facility. Those are built, they're there. There is one out parcel along Tom Short that hasn't come in yet. Again, you have the daycare facility right on Ray Road, and you have Rayfield that's currently under development, and then the rest of the PUD is already built out as single-family residential. So you've got Hunter Oaks as part of that PUD, and Somerset's part of that PUD. The Hunter Oaks and Somerset were kind of the medium density component of that. They had an R6 designation, and then some more of Hunter Oaks had an R20 component. This is really, and you guys at some point will probably see the old Walmart site come back for the PUD amendment. The special use permit's in place, still have to amend that PUD. This is the last piece that doesn't really have any type of permit. Actually, there is an approval to build a church there, but under our current rules, I don't think you could actually do it. But really, there's no real development approvals for that site. So this is the last piece of that PUD to kind of develop. Some environmental features, and you'll see in a minute, you've got a ton of wetlands and floodplains on this property. You really have about 3.5 to 4 acres of this. I believe it's about 20 that's really able to be developed. The rest of it is all floodplain. Transportation-wise, we have one traffic count on the other side of Tom Short Road from this, along Ray. You have about 22,000 vehicle trips per day. And as you know, Ray Road is a 4-lane divided highway, or not highway, it's a 4-lane divided thoroughfare. And then Tom Short is a 2-lane road. With some pretty good improvements at the intersection of the traffic signal. Let me go and grab. So I want to talk a little bit about what has to happen with a PUD amendment. I'll minimize this. So that PUD was developed years and years ago, and the way the county ordinance worked at that time with the PUD, and it really wasn't put in place the normal way a rezoning would happen. So there was no real public hearing that took place. There was a public hearing, but it wasn't a specific public hearing for that site. What happened with that PUD, the county adopted a new land use ordinance back in the 80s, back in the mid-80s, that contained the PUD provisions, contained some new zoning designations, and as part of that ordinance, you have a map that's adopted. And the owners of that site, Tom Short and Ray Road weren't really even there yet. The owners of that site knew they were coming, and they asked the commissioners, as part of that amendment, or as part of that adoption, to include that PUD 6 zoning on that site. So they did. So that's how the PUD 6 got there. The PUD 6 is made up of 3 underlying, we call them use categories, but they kind of mirror zoning designations. So those 3 are B2, R6, and R20. And when the original PUD was put in place, those underlying use designations weren't put down on the site. They came later. And then the way the PUD ordinance worked was, anytime you provided more specific plans, you had to come back to the planning board and the board of commissioners to get those approved. So every time a new application or a new building, something more specific came along, you had to go back through a public process. So, or you changed something in the PUD. And that's what we've got here is that property is designated, it's zone PUD 6 and the use designation is R20. You have caps on some of these things. So the B2 cap is 10% of the total PUD, and the B2 is completely gone. There is no more B2 available. Can't do it. There is, however, R6 available. So what the applicants are asking is to designate a portion of this PUD from the R20 use category to the R6 category. Because I think the R6, Dick's the expert on the PUD, was 35%, right? So you had 35% that was available for R6, and the original developers did not use all of that 35%. So there's still a little bit left. But they've got enough they've actually got a little bit more, but all they can really use is about 3.5 to 4 acres. So that's what they're asking, to redesignate a portion of that from R6, from R20 to R6. The rezoning part comes in. We go back to my staff report. And I know this is complicated. PUDs are complicated, and that's why we took them out of the ordinance. But this is a legacy, and we have to deal with it until it's sorted out. So this piece here, it kind of looks like a weird rectangle. It's got a little piece coming up like this. This initially was a rectangle, and the property was kind of redone a little bit. That rectangle, if you were to just take this line and draw it straight down, is zoned R40. It is not part of the PUD. It was never part of the PUD. That was an old county, I think it was a spray irrigation type system that was used as part of when the county first started their their public sewer system. And that's, you had a small plant there, and it kind of sprayed the effluent out over an area and let it soak into the ground. County doesn't do that anymore. This property was sold years ago, and now the same ownership group owns it. But since the county owned it, they weren't part of the zoning designation of the PUD, so this is an R40 piece that kind of sat out there. So what the applicants are doing is they are redesignating part of that R20 match. So there's your background on PUD zoning and the only thing And this back there is a sewer easement that goes into the sewer treatment plant. The applicant presents, and if there's any opposition or anybody else in the public that wants to speak, I'll come back up and give you the.
As you mentioned, just on the edge of the county line there, first property as you come into UD County from Gray Road. And that point is to the north. That seemed to be one of the best locations with site distance as well as access into the property there. For the residents to use while still providing for that pedestrian connection was something that we've still seen in the past. And sensitive to. Overall, this is just a blow up signal line. someone trying to look around and turn around through adjacent neighborhoods and communities.
Chris, just to
Board slash cementous siding, Novi are in the Charlotte area. Very often, you see these dense townhome projects with 7
Talking with Rayfield.
concern and deal. The only reason why I bring it up is because I drive this a lot in the mornings.
Exactly what you're gonna say.
And to work, and all of a sudden, they stop. Now, I just went on the GIS and was looking up in Mecklenburg, which is
It's just a straight run.
yeah.
All the way down till you get past the traffic light there.
There's lots right
happy to talk to Lee Ainsworth with DOT about that suggestion and kind of get their feedback.
I mean, if that, if they have a light there, that's gonna slow traffic down somewhat. For people to get into that, to this.
Designates the area at Tom Shorten Ray Road is a small commercial center. that's designated.
Anyway.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck, guys.
Good luck.
Thanks, guys.
And butt cakes. Yeah.
Bun cakes.
And there's long. Road, so there's some floodplain, there's some wetlands in that area. This request is not in any of those areas. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I'll come back later at the end and give my
So,
recommendation.
just so I understand, there's, the building itself is 10,000?
But from what I recall, the original plan installed the street.
The dubious
honor of owning the Walmart site today, for better or for worse.